dipped out of sight. All right, we're good. Are you good? Very good. So it is now 1:15 and the Board of County Commissioners has reconvened from our recess and continuing on with their budget presentations. And the next presentation is on Spokane County District Court, and Judge Walker, presiding judge, is going to do the presentation.
Thank you. And I wanted to start by introducing the staff and judges that we have here today. I know a lot of our judges really would have liked to have attended this. They're thankful that they'll be able to watch it after, but unfortunately, they're doing dockets, so we only have a couple who would be able to be here. But we're thrilled to have him here. Judge Smith is our judge who is here today, and beside him is Rhonda Ingram. She is our financial wizard. She is the person who's able to keep us afloat, and we're so very thankful for her. And then beside me here is John Witter, or our oh my gosh, court administrator. Yeah, I was going to say that's terrible. He's been here longer than I have, and I think we're emailing or chatting back and forth usually till at least 8 or 9 at night. So can't believe I couldn't remember his title there. And then right beside him is our clerk of the court, Sherry Hansen. And so one of the things I wanted to start by saying was I've had the opportunity to sit through most of the presentations today and a couple of them yesterday, and I echo what has been said by our partners, and that is that even though no one wants to do this extra work and this deep dive, there is value in it, and so we are thankful for that opportunity. It's also a great reminder of how thankful we should be for all of our partners. And I wanted to mention that because in talking about the decisions that we made, a lot of those decisions were based on being very mindful of the impact that our decisions would have on our partners. You heard that from speakers earlier today, that they recognize that by choosing not to do a line of work often just means that someone else has to do it, a different department has to do it. But as criminal justice partners and also civil justice partners, we're aware that sometimes we have to divide and conquer, and we have to make some agreements as to who's going to do what portion of the workload because we're best suited to do it or some other department is best suited to do it. And so I wanted to preface my comments with that. So in terms of the first slide, it's ironic how very similar all of our mission statements are, so I'm not going to really spend any time on that. But ours is a little shorter than the Superior Court clerk's was, but essentially we're all here to do justice for our community. And our community is very broad-based. We have a lot of different lines of operation in our court. And so I'll talk very briefly about some of those, but I'm really only going to talk about those as they relate to the reductions that we've been asked to make, and not in terms of providing information about all of the different work that we do. So first we start with our org chart. We have 8 elected officials, and somehow I just noticed on this screen everything got kicked over a little bit. But we have 1 vacant judicial position. Judge Tripp's recent retirement has left that position open, and that is a double-edged sword for us. We lost a wealth of information and experience in Judge Tripp when he retired, but it's also an opportunity in terms of helping us with our budget reductions. Underneath the 8 judges, we have our court administrator, John Witter, and then down below, we have all of our different departments and how many staff work underneath them. So essentially below the 8 judges, we have 69 staff members that do work for us, and that information is also going to become important as I talk about the reductions here in a few moments. So in terms of our description of services, we really tried to stay high level, but I wanted you to realize that in terms of the combination of our criminal cases, our infractions, and our civil department work that we do, it averages about 4,800, so shy of 5,000 new case filings every month. So that gives you an idea of what those 69 employees and the 8 judges are doing. They're processing 4,800 new cases every month. And of course, they're continuing to administer all of the existing cases and probation cases. I also wanted to call out that in terms of the civil processing, these are areas where the legislature often speaks, and that results in a shift of work. As I was mentioning earlier, it used to be that our civil case limit was much smaller. Over the years, that's been increased a number of different times. And what that means for our local jurisdiction, we discovered in doing our judicial needs assessment this last year, was that in our community, for some reason, and AOC, the Office of the Court Administrator, is not quite sure yet why, but we have a lot of cases filed in district court that ordinarily in other communities that are similarly situated are filed in Superior Court. We don't have any quarrel with that. It's just some things, when the legislature speaks and raises a limit, that does have an impact on courts. And July 23rd is a date that stands out in my mind because that's the date that many of these new laws come down and have a large impact. Sometimes we refer to them, as you did earlier, as unfunded mandates. There's rhyme and reason to those changes, but they do have local impacts. And so we're anticipating that those civil liability or civil jurisdictional amounts are going to continue to increase, and so these are things that we don't have any control over, but we address them as they come up. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that, as you can see, we do work for 10 other jurisdictions here locally, and we also carry some of the burden for Airway Heights because they have a part-time judge, so we'll do their weekend work and their blood warrants, search warrants, that type of thing after hours. So these are all of the different contracts that we have with our cities within Spokane County to do work. Cheney and Medical Lake have their own court, but we do provide judicial services. We provide a judge for that court. The hearing types on the next page here are all really just intended to give you an overview of the kinds of different hearings that we have. It's one thing to talk about different kinds of cases, but often forgotten in there are the programming that we have, like Alive for 25. Through our probation department, we do work with individuals under 25 years old. The idea of that program is so that they are alive through better driving habits and less criminal activity at the age of 25. So we have a lot of different hearing types and programs that we do in addition to our specialty courts. So the specialty courts here, I wanted to call out because what we know is combining like cases and individuals with similar needs, usually high needs, is that this results in increased public safety, increased community needs being met, and also a better outcome for the individual, the victims in those cases, and the family. So it really has a wide-reaching impact. And part of the reason why we wanted to call out those specialty courts is because this is the kind of work that we do that is not required by law, but what we know is it has the best outcome for individuals that we service in our courts. And so while we often start those programs with a grant, they end up being sustained by the staff that we have, and grants typically last a couple of years, maybe 3 years, and then we have to continue to do the work, and we've done that. We've felt very strongly that this is good work. It's harder work, and it's more time intensive, but the payoff is much greater than just handling cases, throwing them in with all of the other cases. It gives us an opportunity that we wouldn't otherwise have to help people with these very high needs and to have a much reduced recidivism rate. So this, of course, slide just speaks generally to our financial information. And I'm not going to call out anything here on this slide because we have a little more detail that might be more helpful to you as you're looking at the budget reduction and the ways that we're looking at meeting those reductions. So the revenue that we have, of course, is largely dependent on what gets filed with us. So if it's a civil case, we have civil filing fees. If it's a criminal case, we have costs and fines and fees, very few of which stay local. And of course, if it's an infraction, it's the same situation. It's basically mostly dependent on what comes into our court in terms of case filings. And unfortunately, we don't get to keep all of that. The impact also of this processing all of these cases is that it's a very complicated process. In a driving while under the influence case, the clerk's office will be required to break down fees through our case management system that is very antiquated, but we're not too far off in replacing that. But right now there is a great deal of accounting work that goes into making sure everybody who is supposed to get a cut of each fee gets that cut. And so while a lot of the revenue doesn't stay local, it's very time-intensive work. So in terms of programs and expenditures, this is, of course, where we want to spend our time talking to you about that, because what this is, as you can see, the bulk of our expenses are salary, wages, and employee benefits. They are our bread and butter, I guess I'll say. They're the reason that our people are the reason we're able to accomplish the services that we need to accomplish. And so we're going to come back to that a little bit. We did include in here mental health court, but I do want to call out that the mental health court is paid for out of non-general funds. And so I wanted to make sure that that was understood, that those funds come out of 1/10 of 1%. So it isn't a cost to the general fund. The proposed changes, I'm going to just quickly gloss over this because frankly this is a really high level visual and I'm not sure that it's all that helpful, but essentially the yellow line in the middle, the temporary alternative funding for 3 general fund employees, we've come up with a way for 2018 to take care of 3 existing positions that are paid for out of the general fund and pay for them out of other alternatives. The reduced other payroll, $23,000 figure at the top, and the reduced maintenance and operations, $178,000 figure at the bottom. Those are the areas that I want to spend my time on and give you some additional detail about. And so when we look at those budget reductions, I want to start by echoing something that was said by Tom Krasminski earlier, our public defender. He talked about being concerned about who he had in his bullpen. I want to use that same analogy, but also take it one step further and say we're not just concerned about who we might have in the bullpen. We're concerned every day about being able to put the players on the field that we need to have on the field. And this is everywhere from our person who sits at the window to take the fines and fees that are paid, to the person who answers the phone to make sure people get to where they need to get, up to our courtrooms, where if we don't have a court clerk sitting in the courtroom, things are going to go very badly. If we don't have a judicial or a judicial assistant assisting, it can become pretty chaotic pretty quickly in the courtroom. And if we don't have an experienced judge or a judge at all, that's obviously very problematic as well. In terms of talking about the reasons why we chose our reductions, I wanted to start talking about that turnover that we have in our office. So remember, we have about 69 employees, 8 judges, 69 employees. When we lose 33 employees a year, either because we're having to hire them or we're saying goodbye to them, the impact on that is great in terms of leaving us a whole lot of unspent salaries that Ms. Wallace talked about earlier, and why departments might want to roll over those unspent salaries. But the real impact on our court is the impact of not being able to immediately replace someone. So every time we lose somebody, we're looking at about a month of turnaround time by the time we can post for the position, interview for the position, and then give them time to come on into the position. We're usually down a person about a month every time that happens. Then we have the existing impact on the people I call those left behind. Those are the employees who continue to stay with us. they are, for that month that we're down the person, somebody has to do that job as well as their own job. Often we can split it up, sometimes we can't. Sometimes somebody just has to do 2 jobs for that month time. Then the existing staff have to also train that new person. They have to correct all of their errors. They have to sit with them, debrief, go over everything, make sure that they're double checking their work. So that has a tremendous impact on our existing staff and those that stay with us. And so one of the things that we've talked about a lot over the years is why they leave. It'd be really easy to say, well, they just leave because they can get more money someplace else. That's partially true. Some of them take probation or promotions to other departments. Some of them go to other cities and counties to do similar work, or just leave to do other work. But the reality is, what we know is the extensive responsibility and burden on these people also causes them to leave, sometimes for no additional pay, because the reality is, if they don't do something right, someone sits in jail, someone is victimized, and those are heavy burdens for people to bear. Nobody wants to make those kinds of mistakes, and the reality is they're all in the position of making those mistakes. So the impact of those errors and that high turnover rate that we have is great. And it also creates higher costs to our partners. For example, a jail, if we can't process cases or people in the jail fast enough, or if we forget somebody, then that's another day in jail for that individual. It also creates liability when we're not following proper processes because we have not been able to train up someone, or we don't know that they're making mistakes until something becomes obvious. That also creates liability and problems for community safety as well as all of our partners. So I wanted to start by talking about our heavy turnover, because that is part of the reason why we as a court recognize what we could not do was cut any positions. We can barely keep the positions filled. We can't cut them. We're already living without the benefit of many of those employees every month. We're even to the point now where, rather than filling an existing empty position, a decision was made that we don't have anybody to train whoever we would hire in that position. We have to wait. We have to get the other 6 employees who are currently being trained in that department up to speed, because we can't have a brand new person training another brand new person. So that's the main reason why we chose to do everything we could to not lose another body. I know other departments talked about the cuts, 2008, 2009, and we could talk about those, but we're all in the same position. Very few departments recovered those cuts. And part of our predicament is being able to continually fill and train people for positions. And I should note that our judicial information system is a very complicated system. It has a long learning curve in terms of being truly proficient at it. It's part of the reason why the state is investing in getting a new judicial information system. I'm the chair of the committee for the District and Municipal Court Judges Committee, and so I'm going to make sure that what we bring home here is a really great product that hopefully will help alleviate some of those pain points that we have currently. But we aren't looking at, even if we get to be an early adopter, which I'm going to push for in our community, we are not looking at having any relief on the judicial information entry system for at least another year. So we have to continue with what we have and our processes. We do believe, though, that we have in our maintenance and operations budget, we have a lot of line item budgets. And what we did when we were trying to figure out where we could cut, and if it was high level enough to go through it with you, we looked at each line item. For example, jury trials. Was there anything to do that we could do to cut jury costs? There are very few things we can do to cut jury costs. It's solely dependent on how many cases go to jury trial, and that's dependent on the lawyers. We just have to be there to provide those services. And as you've heard over the last couple of years, those jury trials have gone up. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We're there to do jury trials. It just means that there are additional costs. So, and those are costs we can't forecast. We don't know whether it's going to be $28,000 or $48,000 in a year. So we categorize them in those ways: things we had control over, things we had no control over, and things we had a little bit of control over. And so part of the reason why we have not focused in our high-level presentation here on those small sanities, which I know are very important to the budget office, and they're very important to us as well. We don't want to do things that cost our community money. We want to take that money, have innovative and efficient processes. We want to save on postage. We do text message reminders to help people stay out of jail. So we've instituted a lot of technological processes that help us spend less money by using electronics. Part of the reason why we were hesitant to go into those line items is because they're dependent on what happens with our IT department. We are so dependent on the excellent services that we get from our IT department to keep all of those platforms up and running and to help us with those innovations, and they are fantastic at that. So we're not sure if they will have the manpower to help us with those additional efficiencies. We believe in every single line item that are within our control, there are additional efficiencies, and we're looking for those. For example, part of the reason why I said this was an opportunity was because it did not occur to us. A lot of people are laying awake at night, texting, emailing each other, hey, what about this? So it did not occur to us that some of our, when we came before the board to do the civil DUFB resolution to increase our civil fees from $10 to $20 on this one small segment of orders. In looking at that and taking a deep dive and analyzing whether that would have the intended impact and a good impact, it occurred to us that we might be able to take some things that currently come out of the general fund, like say training, which is required. We're required as judges to have continuing education training. And the Office of the Court Administrator pays for a lot of that training, so we're very fortunate there. But there are some small pieces that are not paid for that. Why would we not have the civil judge, if we have any money in that civil DUFB account, why would we not have that paid for out of that civil DUFB account? So we've identified some areas like that. It's not going to be a lot of money, but frankly, $1,000 is $1,000. Every time you can save $1,000, it will add up. So we've identified a number of different areas like that where we really are just shifting the burden, because some things we can't cut. We can't say you can't go to training. We're required to have that training to do our jobs. And there's value in that training. That's where we learn how to do innovative things and bring it home. But certainly we could pay for it out of other line items. So we're looking very closely at all of those potential impacts. One of the things that, in talking about the other payroll, which is our extra help, where we sometimes can bring in people to answer a phone. If it's something that doesn't require a lot of training, we can have a body fill that seat, or a pro tem judge to cover for a judge who is absent or who is at training. In cutting those funds, there is risk in doing that. That brings us back to our, will we have enough players to put on the field to do the things that we're committed to doing? That is a tough position for us to be in, because we worry that with that $23,000, while it might not be a lot, it could have the impact of not allowing us to do our daily operations. So what happens in that case, because we have had situations in years past, we had 2 judges out for hip surgery. Unfortunately, those are not fast recovery times. So when we have situations like that, we can short-term double docket. We can have judges run from this docket to that docket. It is not ideal. It does not it does not result in the kind of service that we want to have, but we can do that short term. Doing it long term is much more difficult. And as I'm often saying, and I don't think our judges appreciate this, we're not getting any younger. Some of us have been on the bench for a very long time, and but with that, there's also the ability to do more things quickly and troubleshoot quickly. So in terms of talking about the what Ms. Wallace talked about earlier in terms of, there was a question from Commissioner Cooney about, are we allowing a rollover of unspent salaries? I would encourage the board on behalf of our court that we rely so heavily to meet our maintenance and operation budget every year. We haven't had a true increase, but in the last, I can't even remember last time we had a true increase, but what we have been afforded, and we've been so thankful to the budget office for this, is the opportunity when we've underspent or not being able to spend the money for different reasons to carry that over to allow us to do some of these innovative projects. So both on the maintenance and operations side, when we've been able to get things paid for by other entities, which we've been fortunate to do in the past in terms of technology, or we've been able to use some trial court improvement money, we have been permitted to carry over that maintenance and operation budget. That has allowed us to stay afloat. If we were to cut that now, we will be unable to sustain the work that we do now, which is why we come to the really difficult option of asking the board if we cannot meet through all of these line item decreases, rolling over of unspent salaries, decreasing some of the work that we do, then the only option we have left is to ask that the vacant position not be immediately filled. That is a difficult thing for us to request, because we know with our judicial needs study that was just done by the Office of the Court Administrator, we need 8 judges to do the work that we do, and we're committed to our 10 partners to providing them with a level of service. They contract with our court because we provide that level of service, and should we fall short of that service, all of those contracts and those partnerships also are jeopardized. But it is the resort that we feel most comfortable with. The judges are willing to, as they have in the past, anytime the need arises, do their job and other people's jobs, and to save, to stop the bleeding with our staff, and to be able to meet the level of service that we've committed to our partners. We feel that this is a potential viable option. I say that understanding that this is not our decision to make. This is solely within the Commissioner's purview. You have given us some great judges in the past through your appointments. One of them is sitting here today, and so we do not want to infringe on your decision making in that regard. We simply offer that up as a potential option so that we aren't shifting work to our other criminal justice partners and our other justice partners who themselves are doing everything they can to keep their heads above water, and so we're able to continue to do the work that we believe is really necessary to provide safety and security and responsiveness to our partners and our citizens. And so then lastly, we have our summary. So I hope I've been able to explain our reason for not giving you the really low level, we're going to save $10 on this, we're going to save $1,000 on that. We're happy to do that if that would be helpful to the board. It became very complicated because some of them required grids to say, we can do this if IT can do that. We can do this if we can roll over that. So we opted not to provide that level of detail. But what we are committed to is streamlining all of our processes to make sure that we're doing the very best job we can with every dime that you all give us and that we get from other sources. And like the 0.1%, we're very committed to making sure that we are not misusing or overspending in any area. And we're committed to continuing with our ways of addressing the ongoing burden. Every time we get a new law comes down, firearms come to mind. That was a huge project for a lot of our justice partners. We have additional record-keeping requirements and additional, not just record-keeping, but affirmative requirements that we have to undertake. We're committed to doing those. We believe that we can continue to do them by automating and integrating a variety of different systems together, and so we're hoping to be able to continue that work. The challenge for us is what will happen after 2018. We don't believe that these, some of these savings, the $130,000 that we saved by paying for 3 different employees out of different non-general fund budgets, we can't sustain that. That was an agreement by the union to not contest us doing that for 1 year, and we're not sure that those funds would be available to us in the future as well. So the challenge for us is, aside from doing those line item, saving every penny we can, some of these reductions will not be long-term, which I know is ultimately the goal of the board, to have really sustained long-term savings. And so with that, I'm very fearful that I've forgotten to say some very important things here, but I also would welcome any questions from any of you.
Thank you, Judge. Any questions? Commissioner Cuny.
So one of the questions I have is you were talking about the innovation new system that's coming online in about a year. So like the clerk's office has Odyssey coming online in November of 18. Is that something, is that feed into your system, or is it a separate system, or how is that working?
There are a lot of lessons learned from the process of choosing the Odyssey system. So Superior Court, Court of Appeals, each did their own committee work and vetting process to determine what system they need. They're all a little different because we have different responsibilities. In terms of them working together, the requirements, my committee's job was to build all of the requirements for the District and Municipal Court Judges Association system. The requirements that were key to us were to ensure that not only did it speak to Odyssey, but it had the capability of speaking to Department of Licensing, Federal Firearms Bureau, everybody that we have to send and get information from, our local partners, so that we could decrease that burden on our IT department in the future by having a standalone system that doesn't require so many add-ons. What we've done now is IT has been wonderful in terms of creating platforms for us, which are essentially add-ons that allow us to be more innovative, more efficient. It is my hope, although we have selected a vendor, a different committee selected the vendor, and the contract negotiations are ongoing, so we're getting very close to starting to work with the vendor to actually determine how things look. So the day-to-day workings of that system. What I can't say, I can't promise, is that what the state can pay for is going to be what we ask for.
Okay.
So
very good. That was going to be my next question.
Yes,
is
and so it is our hope that by being very careful in our process and developing the requirements, that and choosing the vendor, because this vendor is not an unknown, has done a lot of this work, so we're going to be able to save a lot of money by using this vendor in terms of utilizing some processes that they already have and just building on those. So it's our hope that that standalone system will make it much easier for our staff to do their jobs. The training time right now, we have about a 3-year time frame that it takes you to be truly proficient in that system. So you can imagine when we're turning people over, some positions we're turning over multiple times in 1 year, there's no ability to be proficient. That's when mistakes are made. We're hopeful that with the new system, coupled with our fantastic IT department who can then bridge all of our systems into the state system, as well as our other local systems, and they do a fantastic job of that. That's part of the reason why we're able to have the efficiencies that we do. We're very hopeful that number one, we won't overburden staff, which causes them not to want to work for us for very long. And number two, we can do more with what we already have.
And are you looking at 2019 as when that system would come online, or at the end of 18?
There's going to be a lot of beta testing, so I don't want to overpromise. Our committee has been ahead of our time requirements, so it is my hope that we're looking at testing within a year. But I wouldn't hazard to guess that very many of the kinks would have been worked out in terms of bringing all the state data, because these systems are reliant on all the other courts who won't be on this system yet because they'll roll it out. We have about 132 separate standalone courts, about 400 jurisdictions represented, but many courts like our Spokane County contract with their county. So some courts will have a lot more than 10 different partners. But about 100, and I think it's 132 different courts will be utilizing this system in one way or the other, whether or not they have their own standalone that's feeding into that system. But the goal is to get everybody back to feeding into that system so we can rely on my defendant, who is also in 3 other jurisdictions. I'll know what's going on in those cases. I'm not going to put him on probation here if he's already on probation somewhere else and they're well managing him. So that allows us to provide a lot of efficiencies as well by having all the information that we need to do our jobs.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Kearns, did you have any questions? So I would like to compliment you on taking a look at creatively how you can deal with the Dufke accounts, and if there are other revenue streams that you have that you think maybe a different kind of an approach might provide some opportunities for you. We'll certainly encourage you to take a look at that. Like I said, if we haven't been there before, it doesn't mean we won't go there now. And so, the idea is to try and be creative and capture opportunities that maybe we've missed in the past and stuff for whatever reason. So, congratulate you on that effort, and certainly look forward to working with you as we get through this. And you're right. This is a 1-year event, is what the majority of us are really hoping for. We get through 18, and I think the community will recognize the value that we provide to the quality of life here in Spokane. But 2018 will be a tough year for us, so we'll get through it.
Great. We're there with you. Thanks.
Thank you. So I don't think our next presentation is until 3 o'clock. So we are going to recess until 3 o'clock. The goal is to reduce the amount of work we're trying to do here. It's not, yeah, we're streamlining and stuff. So we've eliminated, no. Yeah, we do not have a consent agenda for this afternoon. We've eliminated that so that we can accommodate the budget hearing process and stuff. So we will reconvene here in the chambers at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I think at that point it's Superior Court will do their presentation. I think there'll be the last presentation, then we wrap up. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, and if you feel free to come back at 3 o'clock and enjoy the excitement. So with that, we are recessed until 3 o'clock.